there was already a professionalism there, both in Lviv and in Kiev, pretty high one, and then in Kharkiv, Odessa, later on, it all went on. But the influence then came also from the East, from once Russia developed, particularly in the 1800s. The Russian model was that you used your folk knowledge in music. In other words, you either wrote and used folk tunes or you imitated folk tunes, but that's what established your style. It's let's say in America, one of the things to say, well, what's, American style? Anytime you hear a little jazz in a score, it's that.
Okay, yeah.
Okay? Even if non-Americans, Europeans write it, well, that would be American style.
Yeah. What about Aaron Copland and some of those composers?
Well, but I mean,
is that also?
But they based it a lot on certain kind of folk music.
Yeah.
As well, which is European brought in with words changed, and then of course there was something else. There was black music, which was also very, very important. And a certain kind of rhythms that became, well, those American, come from black culture. They were very important in that way.
Right.
Even what's the most common instrument folk musicians use?
Banjo.
Banjo.
Yeah.
Well, banjo was originally a black instrument.
Right.
So, and the funny part is the blacks could not play on it, not allowed to.
Yeah. Yeah.
Not obviously.
Right. Yeah.
But we're not allowed to, so it had to be a white man with blackface.
Yeah.
I mean,
such a weird thing.
It's so complicated. All this stuff is.
Yeah.
But I just want to say that was it. Well, what was some of the other influences? Well, we know European was there. We know that Eastern was there. Some Northern, Belarusian and Lithuanian and what later became Latvia and Estonia. That also had its influence. And then, of course, the local Slavic folk music. And specifically in Ukraine, choral singing was very big. Not only in Ukraine by any means, but in there it was really big. I mean, there were very few people who knew how to play an instrument. If they did, they would play the bandura, which was a kind of a lute. But that became very important. And that changed, that had different structures depending where you go. The Vienna Czech influence on Western Ukraine, undeniably that was important. The kind of both religious and other influence that occurred in central Ukraine, and then the eastern Ukraine would be the influence eventually of Russian thing. And then the southern Ukraine was very much, I think, under the influence of Turkic and Tatar music.
Okay.
The Duma and all that sound really very, very almost Jewish in a way. And that's partly because there were a lot of Jews living.
Can you explain what the Duma is?
Well, Duma means thought.
Okay.
And that has a political meaning now also. But Duma was really a narrative. It was narrative sung, and the tradition has it was a blind Cossack, usually with a young boy, an orphan most likely, that was his eyes and feel, and they would travel from town to town, farms to farms, and entertain. They were like troubadours.
Yeah, or trouvères, yeah.
Very much like that.
Okay.
And if I were to play you some of the examples, it would sound very, very much that you would think of is in the Ottoman Empire. Or all that. So, and the influence is very much that. So there's all these things are part of what was Ukraine, particularly, I would say, much so in the late 18th and 19th century. Although the Turkic wars and all of that were fought at the end of the 17th century and partly in the beginning of the 18th century, mid 18th century, until the Russians came and kind of stopped all that. But the influence is there. And the tradition of Kobzar, they would call them, the ones who did this, and they were mostly about wars, about people, famous people, and about things that occurred, about slaves, because the Tartars often raided southern Ukrainian towns for slaves and then sold them to Turks, kept some, otherwise they sold them to Turks.